That is the spinal cord. Then we see there are 12 cranial nerves. And between C1 and C7, C1, then how many lumbar in the dog? Lumbar vertebra in the dog, how many?
7.
Mm-hmm. L7. T1, okay, T13, right? L1 to L7, and then S1 to S5, S4, and then the coccygeal down to whatever. Depending. So, this is the borderline between the cranium and the spinal cord. And of course, you know that between the C7 and then T1, one is going to come out. So C6 comes out that way. So this model explains all the functions of the cranial nerves and all the functions of the spinal nerves as they come out. But one thing is clear. The brain is made up of different parts of the brain. And these nerves come out from different parts of the brain, supplying different parts of the head region as sensory and motor. So, which presupposes that the structures of the head region will fit the brain of its status, and the brain will also give a perfect output command. Likewise, the structures in other regions of the body. So, but beyond the brain or below the brain, those other structures of the body will be controlled by the spinal nerves. Don't forget that one major cranial nerve, regardless of the fact that it is coming from the cranium, descends, and that is the vagus, right? Don't always forget that. The vagus is one cranial nerve that descends and supplies all the major organs in the different regions of the body. Likewise, if I may say, a general question that can arouse our interest or curiosity. Do structures of the head region receive sympathetic innervation? Yes or no? Do some structures of the head region receive sympathetic innervation?
Yes.
Good. Sympathetic fibers, do they come from the head region?
No.
Which means wherever they come from, they should ascend, right? To the head region. And they ascend through what? Which pathway? Sympathetic supply to the head region ascends through which pathway? Good. Through the sympathetic chain. That's the paravertebral. Okay? So we've received that now. So, and what two major structures of the head region do you think will have that sympathetic innervation? Eyes, good. Salivary gland, good. Basically, so the salivary gland, the eyes, and then the what's it called now? Of course, you mentioned the ciliary muscles. That's to be the eyes. So as to control the pupils. So two major organs in that head region: the salivary gland and the eyes. So that anatomical description is very important. So we are now going to so another important thing we need to know is that these cranial nerves, they come from specific regions of the brain, and then they bear these different names, supplying different structures of the head region, and then some of them receive sympathetic dual innervation. Now, for the spinal cord, we have outlined the sections. They come out from the intervertebral foramen, then go to the tissue. So we need to look at the microscopic architecture of the spinal cord. Remember I told you that we're going to come to that. So this is very important. You need to understand this, that the spinal cord is made up of the white matter and the gray matter. And the gray matter is divided into the dorsal column, the lateral column, the ventral column, the interlateral horn. And then, so now, if this is the organ, it will enter into the dorsal column. There is always a swelling here called the dorsal root. This dorsal root, there is no synapse there. So sensory is a straight road. It moves into the dorsal column and forms a synapse. So the first synaptic association within the vertebral column takes place in the dorsal, within the gray matter takes place in the dorsal column. Please take note. Like I said, neurophysiology is very sweet if you approach it from the point of progressive understanding, right? Just understand it's not complex. For example, I just said it now. By the time I put up a question, sensory innervation, sensory fibers enter the gray matter in through the dorsal horn. Yes. So you can call it dorsal horn, you can call it dorsal column, right? So its synapses there may form an interneuron or may not, depending on whether it is monosynaptic or polysynaptic. It continues and comes out and supply the same organ, right? So this is going to be the efferent or motor, and this is the sensory or afferent. So that's how it works. That's how it works. So you need to understand this. Number two, this brain here, regardless of the fact that the spinal cord has this outlook, don't forget that the spinal cord is the younger brother or younger sister of the brain, which means the spinal cord is to a large extent dependent on the brain. However, it can still exhibit some form of control on the organ on its own, right? So at this level, which looks like what? A reflex arc, right? So reflexes are controlled from the neck region down to the tail, so to say. Reflexes will be controlled by spinal cord. So what does that tell us? It tells us that from here to here, we can use reflexes to assess the integrity of the spinal cord. So if there is the presence of a reflex in a particular region, it means that spinal cord in that point is intact, right? But if reflexes are lost, especially at the caudal portion, right? So if there is a cord here, if this is the spinal cord, and this is the bladder, for example, if there is a problem here, do you think it will affect the bladder? No, it won't. It's only if there is what? A problem around the zone. Because the brain also modifies the effect to give it a fine control. By the time we do renal reflex, you find out that the brain is also another reflexes. So there is nothing you do that you are not aware of. But at the first instance, you might exhibit an unconscious act, followed by what? Analysis of what has happened. If I step on a pin, I will definitely, without even thinking about it, where it is, the nature of the pin, whether it is long or short, whether I've had the experience before, or I must have to withdraw mine. That is a reflex conscious act. So that is primarily controlled by the spinal cord, and it's a typical reflex. If I am not able to do that, that means there is a spinal cord problem. The next phase of it is for me to begin to analyze. Oh, what is that kind of? what is the intensity of the pain? Have I had this pain before? Okay, let me even watch and see. You are now bringing a high level of consciousness. That component is controlled by the brain. All right? So that shows us that activities coming lower from the body, entering the spinal cord, still has a way of reaching the brain. But automatic response would have been exhibited by the spinal cord. What does that tell us? So for the brain to be involved, there is going to be another pathway. Another pathway. Can you see that? Can you see that? So this pathway now is what we call ipsilateral on the same side. Are you seeing it? It can also be like this. If it is not like this, it can go like this. It can do what we call crossover, which means if it goes this way, everything on this part of the body will be controlled by the other side of the brain. Does that make sense? So this is what we call the decussation. Decussation. When you say that a tract or a fiber has decussated at the level of the spinal cord, it means that it has crossed over the other side before ascending to the brain. So, and we call those, there are 3 tracts. We call it the anterolateral system. Anterolateral systems. So there are 3 major tracts that belong to these anterolateral tracts. That means what? Tracts that decussate at the spinal cord level before ascending to the brain. So, I'm just laying this general overview so that by the time we start watching our slides, it's going to be much easier. So this is number 1. Now, what have you seen now? Generally. Impulses on tissues, stimulation arising from a tissue or an organ send information to the spinal cord, and the spinal cord has a way of initiating a spontaneous reflex, and the brain is also informed of that information for a cranial control of the spinal cord effect. And that control brings about perfect coordination in terms of automatic reflex and any other form of action that the animal has to take that will require what? Refined activity in terms of memory, in terms of judgment, in terms of analysis, and all of that. You begin to think, oh, how do I move my leg to dance well, to play this piano very well, and all of that, right? Good. So, what are you seeing here now? Ascending. Ascending. So, in the organization of the spinal cord and of nerves generally, within the central nervous system, or for the control of organs, there is what we call what? Ascending tract. So fibers that control sensory fibers from the organ or from the tissue enter the spinal cord through the dorsal root, synapses at the dorsal column may or may not decussate and ascend to the brain. So by this organ has fed the spinal cord and also fed the brain, leaving these two with their opportunity to control that organ perfectly. This one controls it in a reflex manner, and this one controls it in a very fine, conscious perception and regulation. So, we have what we call ascending pathway. So, fibers are arranged. Sensory fibers are arranged in an ascending pathway. So, now that is ascending pathway. The next one is if the information has been received by the brain. Usually, this passes through several. This is the hindbrain, it moves to the midbrain, it now moves to the forebrain, that is cerebral cortex, that is the terminus. So all sensory inputs terminate where? At the cerebral, not necessarily the forebrain, but cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex is divided into several lobes: frontal lobe, visual lobe, occipital lobe, and all of that, depending on what is to be controlled, right? So all sensory pathway terminate where? At the sensory portion, or what you call sensory areas. So the cerebral cortex is basically divided into two. The sensory pathway ends here. So this is what? The sensory area of the cerebral cortex. Then it feeds this through an interneuron, and then from this is now the motor area. Why is it called motor? That is where the fiber that will now go down. So if we come back here, that is the sensory, it ends in the sensory portion. This is cerebral cortex divided into two. It ends here, then this one continues to come down. It comes down. Where do you, for this to control this organ, where do you think this synapse will form? I asked the question. Do you think it is from here? Should it be here? Should it be here? Should it be here? Yes. Because this is where the afferent flows out. So, in order for the brain to control this, remember that this is the one controlling this. So it shouldn't have to form another fiber. All it does is to do what? Right? To release each neurotransmitter that will control this. And this control can be what? Excitatory or inhibitory. Again, depending on the pathway involved, there might be collaterals. When you get the word collateral in neurophysiology, it means what? Branches. Collaterals means branches. So there might be collaterals from here to achieve something here. For example, in pain, something gives us to do something here to control pain. We'll talk about that when we do the physiology of pain. Okay. So collaterals might be given. It's not a must that it will come here definitely, but it's depending on the function of that descending pathway, it may have to give collaterals to other places. Right? Good. So what do we call this one? And we call this here. This one. So that's the general organization. Now, the next thing we need to mention is that when you go to, assuming this was to be a very big city, if you are going to West Bay, there would have been how many, more than 1 or 2, 3, 4 roads, right? Good. So you don't expect every part of the body to use the same tract, all right? So there will be several roads going up and several roads going down, depending on which organ is to be controlled. So several organs make use of several ascending pathway, or let me say fibers arising from different regions of the body make use of different ascending pathways. And to regulate those group of organs from different regions, there is also expected to be different descending pathways. So we are going to be looking at this picture. We are going to be looking at different portions of the gray matter. We are going to be looking at the different ascending pathways, where they are coming from, and we're going to be looking at several descending pathways where they are going to. So that is the general framework, and then that is as it relates to the spinal nerves going to various organs of the body. But as for the cranial nerves, there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves coming out from both sides, and they supply different cranial structures. And we're going to be looking at the names of those cranial nerves and the structures they contain. So that is all about the motor tree. Another aspect of the motor tree is that we may have to look at several portions of the brain, different parts of the brain, and their functions. And that will be the first assignment for the semester. Even though we have it in the slides, but I think I want a more detailed stuff. So, you will be telling me brain physiology from the standpoint of different parts of the brain and their functions. The thalamus, the hypothalamus, the corpus striatum, the amygdala, the cerebral cortex, the cerebellum, the pons, the brain ventricles, the habenula, the subthalamus, and several of them. The corpora quadragemina, and there are several. You should have done that in anatomy by now, the parts of the brain. Have you done that? Okay. So you will do it, you will treat it. But it's always good when you start hearing those terminologies, you know, like corpus striatum, you know. And I remember in those days, the professor would be mentioning all of that. I'm like, am I supposed to understand all this stuff and all of that? But it's not difficult. That's why I said I want you to do it by yourself. All right? It's not anything difficult. Is that all in my slides though? Yeah. But I want a kind of that touch. Do that self-touch to it. So that by the time you find yourself from the cranium, comes out from the head region and divides into two. Each one goes to the cochlea. The cochlea is like this, and then this other one is like this. The vestibular apparatus is made up of the semicircular canal, like this. I'll show you. So, all of that is rolling. So this nerve moves here. This is the one that controls balance. This is the one that controls hearing. So two of them, this is the cochlear nerve, and this is the vestibular nerve. And they form, so the vestibular nerve, cochlear nerve, two of them unite together to form the vestibular cochlear nerve. Alright? So, if this is the picture of a spinal cord, microscopically, are you only going to have it like this? Just one like this? Remember that this is up to the tail, so you're going to see it like this. Does that make sense? So if this is just a magnification of a section of this. Alright? So starting from here, we're going to be seeing all of this. So when it moves from this one, it's going to encounter another one here. Alright? That's intersegmental tract. From one portion to another, from one portion to another. And in real neurophysiology, what is happening here will also happen here. That's so the forming an intersegmental tract, which means from one segment to the other. Next point, everything that has to do with the sensory component. All right? Coming from the muscle, enters the spinal column, it may or may not decussate, it ascends. Somatosensory. It has nothing to do with motor. Okay? Somatosensory. Remember, we have a reflex component of it. This reflex component cannot be called somatosensory. It is the reflex connection. So somatosensory is a reflex connection. So somatosensory means that, yeah.
So does it descend then, or only ascends? Can it descend also?
The descending cannot be part of it. Ascending terminates here. Somatomotor starts from here. So descending is somatomotor. Okay? And it will eventually come out from here and control the organ. So somatosensory starts from the muscle, passes through the dorsal column of the spinal cord, and terminates in the, more specifically, cerebral cortex of the brain. Which means, and of course we know by brain anatomy, there are the hindbrain, the midbrain, before we get to the cerebral cortex. So it would have passed through the cerebellum. I'm mentioning that because we are going to be coming in with tracts. And when we mention a particular tract, if I'm going to West Bay, you don't expect me to, from here, if I mention to you that I got to Georgetown before I got to West Bay, you will be thinking, is either I have enough fuel to waste or that I'm crazy, right? I should have just gone is way. So when we mention tracts are specific nerve pathway. We're going to divide this as dorsal column. We're going to divide it into different portions, so that a fiber may be coming from here. I hope you know that the spinal cord is half. That is, this is the dorsal column receiving it from the left. This is the dorsal column. So all structures on the left will send in their sensory column, the sensory fibers, right? If it is need to decussate, it can cross over, which means these parts of the body is controlled by. That is for those structures for those tracts that are decussated. So if this crosses, it means that that organ that has a decussatory fiber will be controlled by that organ on the left. Which fibers are decussated will be controlled by the right side of the brain. Does that make sense? And if there is a structure, an organ here, and if each fiber decussates, occurring in the right will be controlled by the left side of the brain. Right? Yeah. So now, if an organ sends in a sensory fiber into the dorsal column, it may not necessarily be on the same part of the dorsal column. Some will enter here, some will come in and enter here, some will come in and enter here, some will even come in and enter here before it either goes up or it decussates. So which means the dorsal column is a generic stuff. There are still several pockets of nuclei in the dorsal column that receives tracts from different parts of the body. So those parts are called nucleus posterior marginalis, substantia gelatinosa, the nucleus proprius, and the nucleus dorsalis. So these are the different four major parts of the dorsal column. And I will show the best thing is if I ask you to arrange the following in their best order, in their order of occurrence in the sensory pathway. The first thing will be the stimulus. The next thing will be the receptor. The next thing will be the organ or tissue. The next one will be the sensory fiber. The next one will be the dorsal column. The next one will be the ascending tract. The next one will be, I can say dorsal column or spinal cord, either way. The next one will be ascending tract. The next one will be the thalamus or the tectum or the cervical region. Any part of the, or cerebellum, or cerebrum, any part, all those tracts we mentioned in that order. And then the cortex. So you should be able to arrange them in that order. First, sensation, which can be touch, which can be pain, vibration, temperature, hot or cold, that is the sensation or the stimulus. Followed by the receptor, followed by the tissue or organ, followed by the sensory fiber, followed by the dorsal column, followed by the ascending tract, followed by any part of the brain mentioned, and then terminates at cerebral cortex. That is the sensory pathway. Then if it is somatosensory, this organ I'll be mentioning what? Muscle. Skeletal muscle. So instead of saying the organ, I will say stimulus, skeletal muscle, and then the rest of it. Make sense? Okay. So now the motor system. The motor system is if this is the dorsal column and this is the ventral column, this is the internuclear horn. So this is a cell. Cell bodies are located here. Cell bodies are located here. I hope you know that when the axon is coming out, the axon has a cell body, right? Mm-hmm. So now, in the motor system, this is skeletal muscle, and this is a visceral organ. If the motor system, if the fiber comes from, if the cell body of the fiber is located in the ventral horn. Is going to go to skeletal muscle. If the fiber comes here and passes through here, so visceral organs, the motor fibers, the cell bodies of the motor fibers controlling the visceral organ, which means, in other words, autonomic nervous system, right? And again, when you talk about autonomic nervous system fibers coming from the spinal cord, will be called what? An autonomic fiber coming from the spinal cord from T1 down to L2 will be called what type of fiber? Sympathetic. So, for sympathetic system, most specifically, their fibers come out from the cell bodies are located here, not here. Right? And this zone is called intermediolateral horn. So the spinal cord, which controls visceral organs, are located in the spinal nerves that control visceral organs, T1 to L2. Of course, the script that describes sympathetic are located in the intermediolateral horn, while the one in the ventral horn go to what? Skeletal muscle. They are all motor coming out from that. So, somatic controlling skeletal muscle come from the ventral horn, visceral comes from the intermediolateral, and they are all what? They are all motor in activity. So, and respectively means this one is to this, and this one is to that. The ventral horn. The ventral horn, did we divide the dorsal horn into nuclei? So the same way the nuclei of the dorsal column is divided into pockets of nuclei, the same way the ventral horn is divided into pockets. So we have the medial nuclei group of cells. It's not enough to say that, to refer to it as ventral horn. So we divide it into lateral, that is the entire ventral horn. This zone, we can divide it into what? Lateral, medial, and then the last. So from the somatic, so here, those ones coming out from here, the medial, will supply the axial skeleton. Those ones coming out from here will supply the muscles, skeletal muscles of the axial skeleton, the axial muscles, so to say. While this one will supply the non-axial skeletal muscles. Then for this one, the somatic motor columns, from both of them, two fibers come out. Whether it is coming out from here or coming out, as a matter of fact, it's going to pass through this way. This is actually what it means. We come from this. That's how. So imagine from this is divided into medial and axial. Just very divide it into two. Medial and lateral. So the ventral horn is divided into medial and lateral. So fibers come from medial, fibers come from, and when they come out as two forms. There are two of them coming out from each. They come out from each. We have the gamma and the alpha. Both of them supply skeletal muscle, whether it's coming from lateral, whether it's coming from, they supply skeletal muscle. And skeletal muscles are made up of the intrafusal fibers. So if this is the muscle, if that is the muscle to which they supply, either coming from here or here, we have this is I taught you that before. Remember? Which picture in my office, right? I'm sharing. Yeah. So I can remember. So you have the extrafusal fiber and you have the intrafusal fiber. So the alpha coming out, there are two fibers actually. You have the alpha, so the alpha goes to the extrafusal fiber, the gamma goes to the intrafusal fiber. I told you the functions of the intrafusal fiber is more of a receptor. It is the receptor part of the muscle which informs the brain about the state of the muscle, especially the length of the muscle. So if the muscle has extended in length to the extent that it is going to break up, to inform the brain, and then the motor control of the brain will be for the muscle to relax, so that it doesn't break up. But if the muscle has not contracted, if the muscle needs to contract, it will inform the information that will come from the alpha will cause the muscle to contract. So the gamma supplies the So it starts from the brain, it comes down here, forms a synapse. It's coming down here, sorry. Forms a synapse, and then that is the muscle. So it runs down to the spinal cord. Can you see there is no synapse? So the first synapse is here. So this is now the descending pathway, right? Or the motor pathway. We're going to divide the descending pathway into two. Is this from here to here? From here to here belongs to the central nervous system, right? And from here to here is outside the central nervous system, right? Are we following? Here is called, see this is motor, right? From here is upper, and from here is what? Lower. So we are going to call this the upper motor neuron, lower motor neuron. Does that make sense? If there is a problem from here to here, either manifesting as a damage to the brain, damage to the spinal cord, or infection at any of these, will this muscle will be diseased, right? Somehow. And that kind of disease is going to be called upper motor neuron disease. If there is a problem from here to here, either, especially involving the muscle, into the nerves, the muscle may not be affected primarily, but it may be affected secondarily because the nerve is already affected, right? So there's nothing wrong with the muscle on its own, as it were. But if there's any problem here, automatically it will come from the muscle, somehow. So if there's a problem here, let's assume primarily on the nerves, it's going to be described as what? Lower motor neuron. So in your clinic, in your neurophysiology clinic of training, your clinicals, you will encounter these two major conditions. You will encounter neurological disorders that impact on muscle function and movement, which may manifest as what? Paralysis or paresis of muscles, inability to walk rightly, inability to maintain balance and gait, posture and all of that, and the consultant will tell you that this problem is an upper motor neuron disease. Which means, if this is let's say, the bladder, this is the bladder, that's the bladder for example, the spinal cord is here, and then nerves are here, and there's no problem at all. But for any reason, for one reason or the other, there's a problem with this nerve supplying this bladder. Assuming this is muscle, but this is a smooth muscle, right? So I should be using muscle, I should be using cerebral muscle for example. Let me say the muscle of the hind limbs. The muscle of the hind limbs, for example. Hind limbs. So if there's a problem here, either because calcium is not enough, hypocalcemia or hypercalcemia, or the dog has been bitten by venomous animal, right? Scorpion, snakes, and all of that. And for any reason, or even consumption of a toxic chemical that has some negative impacts on neuronal function, right? Or even consumption of a plant that is toxic. We don't know, but it's possible. These are possibilities. This nerve can be affected. Spinal cord, no problem. Brain, no problem. This nerve is affected. It's going to be called, it will affect this muscle. And that's going to be a lower motor neuron disease. How do you distinguish that? If you do a skin test, if you do a skin reflex test around this region, it will be positive, showing you that the spinal cord is not a problem. Right? What we call the Panniculus test. Panniculus test and all of that. So this is just to bring us to the